Making stretch. Okay.
Oh, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Replimat, a regular chatcast in which two thoroughly attractive and intelligent males, that's me, Tim, and him.
Me, Andy, apparently.
Go through every episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine in chronological order. And this week we have made it up as far as Season 2, Episode 19, Blood Oath, which was directed by Winrich Kolb. I've struggled with that one before. Story by Peter Allen Fields and Andrea Moore Alton, in brackets, idea, close brackets. Written by Peter Allen Fields and first broadcast on the 28th of March 1994. And according to Netflix, the relative calm of Deep Space Nine is shattered by the arrival of 3 Klingon warriors. There we go.
Well, it's not inaccurate.
Sounds exciting. Yes.
But Tim, tell us. Newbie. Oh yeah, just so the fans know, I get Tom, who the fuck? Tim had some homework this past week, and that is to watch Blood. No. Wow. Journey's End. Gosh, it's late at night, clearly.
Come on, teach. What's my homework? Yes, Journey's End.
Just to get himself ready for what's coming up. So, Tim, just briefly, what did you think of Journey's End, and what do you think the relevance it will have on DS9? There was a sentence there.
Well, I suppose the relevance is obviously them agreeing this border with the Cardassians. And the obviously the impact in Journey's End, the handing over of this planet whose name I can't remember now, but where the Native Americans or the descendants of the old Native Americans have claimed it as their own. It's been a while since I watched an episode of Next Generation, there's a lot of things about this episode that reminded me why I struggle with Next Gen. I find it difficult to empathise with any of the characters. So it's not something I've ever been able to put my finger on. I don't think, but I just I'm not. I don't like Picard particularly very much, which doesn't help. I don't think at all. But a lot of the characters, I think I have the same issue with them that I have with O'Brien in DS9. Actually,
right.
I think they are. Everyone's always trying to be I don't know, they're trying to be too good, too honest, it's that utopian future that Roddenberry created, and it's I think it just comes across to me as false. The idea of, it's a lovely idea of everyone kind of working towards like a common goal, as it were. The betterment of everyone that's part of the Federation. I find it insincere. I think that's, and so, but to some extent, this was an interesting episode because obviously you've got the issues with Wesley, who's just suddenly decided, actually no, I don't want to be I don't want to be part of. I don't want to go through Starfleet. I want to become
We're dealing with this nonsense, thanks.
I want to become a Marvel superhero and go off with this frontal lobed traveller. Who I've seen before. I recognised that character, so I must have seen another episode with him in.
Yeah, he appears twice before.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and when that character was sort of moving almost apart from the kind of the population of the Native Americans. On that planet, I thought there's something odd about him. He's not. He's kind of part of the community, but he's not. There's so there's lots of things going on. But I enjoyed it. I think for what it was, but it didn't make me think. Oh, I really want to watch the rest of Next Gen. So.
It does kind of make me wish now that I had made you do Next Gen first as a series as a whole, because you would maybe come to appreciate more if you saw it more contextually. I don't know.
Maybe.
But did you spot the relevance for Wyatt's homework, really?
There was nothing specific that stood out. No, if there's a message I missed, then I must have missed it.
Okay. Well, this will become relevant then, or become apparent, I think, when we next return to DS9.
Okay.
This is basically where it would have been in the continuity, so I figured let's actually do it here as opposed to straight before the next episode, because it was obviously meant to be a bit of a time between these events and then what happens on DS9. But we'll get to that next time, or next DS9 time, obviously, depending. It might be next week, it might be after, we haven't decided yet. But let's talk Blood Oath then. And
indeed.
Again, tell me, what did you think? Start the ball rolling.
This was an interesting DS9 episode, and it was. Apologies for jumping straight to the end, but it was an episode that made me think of it more as a ongoing serial with that end, because the ending doesn't. There's no closure at the end. It's
not for
this
Dax,
is
certainly no.
for Jadzia Dax. There's obviously I would like to think that the aspect of what's happened in this episode would potentially not necessarily carry on, but certainly be referenced at some point. So I like that. I like the idea as well that that even though they've gone to great lengths so far to to kind of state that any kind of like promises or commitments made by the Trills as their previous host are not, they're not kind of carried along into to the new host. We had that there was that whole episode, wasn't there, in the first series where about whether someone could be tried for murder or whatever.
Right, for the actions of
whatever it was,
that they are technically two different people.
Yeah, so it was interesting to play with that here and to follow kind of Jadzia's journey as she finds herself kind of not necessarily obliged, but she finds it within herself that she needs to fulfill Curzon's blood oath. And just effectively sort of forcing herself onto these Klingons, these ancient,
there must have been
wrecks of Klingon
must have
warriors.
been when Curzon was really young as well, because apparently it's 80 years ago. So Curzon must have been really young. So I know he was an old man when he died, but I didn't get the impression that he was in his 90s when he died. But I'm guessing he must have been at very least.
I mean,
for 80 years.
with that, I just assumed that whoever the Trill users hosts, potentially, as they're not, I'm assuming they're not ordinary human beings.
Well, no, I mean,
they
the
just
Trill are still
age
the
differently.
host as much as they are the symbiote. So, yeah, I mean, the Trill aren't human regardless. So I suppose it could just be they have long lives. That's definitely possible. You know, like Klingons clearly have long lives too, since these Klingons are like 100 and 150 or so Odo reckons anyway.
And actually, that was something I liked as well. It started off as an Odo episode. You think, oh, this is good.
Seemed
and
to be,
then
didn't it?
he gets the first sort of 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, and then suddenly, actually, no, it's almost as soon as Dax goes, whatever his name was. It was Kang, there was Koloth, and there was...
Did you say Core?
That's it, Core, yeah.
The Dharma,
and as soon as she says that,
Core. Yeah.
It's a Dax episode from that point onwards. So it's like Screen Wipe, and now it's Dax. And that was good.
I thought there's some really good stuff in it. For me, the latter half of the episode gets a bit meh. Like basically, once they're actually off on their not really a quest, on their revenge kick. Basically, as soon as they're on the Bird of Prey onwards, apart from the initial conversation between Dax and Kang, which is interesting, where she's trying to and does convince him that actually maybe it's a good day to live. You know, I think that was good. But then basically after that scene, I'm just like, yeah, it's all a bit run of the mill now, and it does get resolved really easily and really quickly, actually. Yeah. And I don't personally think the fights, the actual fight hand to hand, were that dynamic. But then we have got three quite old guys doing them, so I suppose they're a bit rusty.
Yeah, and the albino's an old boy as well, isn't he? So
see, the albino, just on him quickly. Did you get a sense that he was supposed to be a Klingon himself? Because I always look at the makeup and think it's not a choice that the makeup looks quite Klingon-esque. Which I'm like, it seems to be like they're trying to say he is a Klingon, just a albino Klingon. But he does keep going on about Klingons in the third person, like he's not a Klingon. But I know that certain other media have basically suggested that he is a Klingon. So maybe some sort of outcast because of his albino nature, and maybe he was, I don't know, humiliated or whatever by Klingons, so he considered himself not of them. But design-wise, it's like, if he wasn't intended to be Klingon, then maybe the design could have been a bit different.
Yes.
Because there's a definite Klingon-ness to it.
He's got a Klingon vibe to him. And yes, I thought...
I mean, the forehead, the ridge,
I assumed all along that he was a Klingon. So, rogue Klingon or whatever.
Okay, that's interesting.
But in fairness, if he spent a lot of his formative years getting singled out because he has different colouring to other Klingons, and potentially there's a reason there why he might think, well, screw this for a game of soldiers. I'm not Klingon. Yeah, I'll do my own thing and get my revenge.
Going back to your earlier comment of Dax's story, what I like is we're at the point now. This season has done it quite a bit, I think, already, where they're redefining the character of Jadzia. They're really discovering who she is now, and they're really like, oh, we get her now. Now we can lean into it really well, because we've seen like the fun loving side of the Ferengi and all that, and now we're seeing this more. Or maybe, I mean, you could easily argue it's part of her getting used to being joined, that she's leaning more into being at one with her past hosts. So, you know, I think narratively it kind of fits too. But I think it really works. And I mean, again, knowing what's coming up, obviously, I can see here, oh, there's so much of the building blocks of Jadzia here, so much. And it's actually really good, I think. But narratively, it makes sense too, I think.
I did particularly like the way that she was so intent on seeing out this blood oath, and then once they were going, then suddenly realizing, actually, this is not a heroic mission to to live another day. These are three tired Klingons who've seen the opportunity to die in some kind of glory. But
yeah. I think that's a consequence of the conversation she has with Kira, which just happens to be playing behind me, bizarrely.
Yes.
We're literally on that scene right now. And that's a really good scene, actually. It shows, that Dax is still, or Jadzia rather, is still wrestling with the idea of it. But it really demonstrates the friendship that she has with Kira. Because at first Kira's like, I don't really want to talk about this. But then she can see something's bothering Jadzia, so she's literally doing it right now behind me. She literally then follows her and like, hang on a minute, what's going on? Let's talk more about this. And shows a really good side to Kira as well. So, yeah. So I can see why it makes sense that...
She's not in it very much, is she? I mean, Kira, she's only got a couple of scenes, and Cisco's
she's in 2 scenes.
Hardly in it as well.
And then, he basically gets, again, 2-3 scenes. But that's fine. And no O'Brien, I noticed this week. I don't think I saw O'Brien this week anyway.
No, I didn't see O'Brien.
I don't recall seeing O'Brien. No. Did we see Julian? I'm thinking we probably did.
Didn't see Bashir. Only saw Quark and Odo.
Kira, Dax.
Yeah.
Ben. O'Brien, I got a feeling Bashir must have appeared at some point. We just can't remember it because it's just a really minor thing. Because, I mean, O'Brien not appearing, that's fairly regular, But Bashir not appearing seems unusual. I don't know. I can't remember.
In the background in Quarks or anything, I don't recall seeing him at all. He certainly wasn't trying to help the drunken Klingon.
No, definitely not. Speaking of the Klingons, I know I've mentioned this to you before, and I think I did tell you this a few weeks ago just to set you up for it, which you may have forgotten. But these 3 Klingons were in 3 TOS episodes back in the 60s. Same actors, same characters. Yes.
Yeah, is it the same actors?
Same actors, yep.
Wow.
That, I have to admit, I kind of like Koloff in this episode in particular. He's the white-haired of the more grey of the 3, taller one. What I also like is the 3 Klingons here. One's played by actually all 3 white guys. Well, not white. John Colicos, can't tell you what his nationality is, but he's definitely not, he's not Caucasian. But the other 2 are. And their makeup, I think, reflects it, because they don't look as dark-skinned as some Klingons look. Because there's definitely been a time in Star Trek back in the 60s, even in the 70s and in the films, where white characters are quite, browned up to be a Klingon. Which I don't have that much of an issue, because I'm like, well, they're aliens, so it doesn't really matter, I think. I mean, if they're obviously trying to play black characters, humans, that would be different. But as Klingons are just mostly dark skinned, I don't think that really comes across as a problem to me anyway. But they're same actors, same characters, because there's actually a line, I believe there's a line between Dax and I think it's Core about how he used to always go on about how he wants trade traded jibes with Kirk. I believe there's a line there. But actually, Core and John
Must have missed that
Colicos.
line.
Yeah, just it's very brief when she's basically trying to convince him to get past being a drunken idiot.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? Yeah, Core Colicos. He was literally the first Klingon we ever saw in Star Trek.
Right. Okay.
So him going back in particular. Although that's what I was going to say. Koloff, which is the taller of the three. I kind of wish he had been killed at the end because I found him quite an interesting character. Kang being killed, that makes sense. Yeah, that seems an obvious conclusion to that story.
Yeah.
But Koloff, rather, is like, I don't know if you needed to kill him off because his death was a bit meh anyway. And, they could have probably ended up doing more with him, potentially.
Yeah. I was surprised that any of them survived. Actually, I thought that it would be one of those situations where only Jadzia walked away at the end. I'm not sure. I was watching how she was fighting. I'm not sure she actually killed any of them, any of the albinos sort of guards or henchmen. And I wonder if they did that deliberately so that she doesn't have that on her conscience.
Yeah,
but I was also expecting her to say that when she got back to DS9 and walked into the control room and walked back to her station. I was expecting her to turn around and go, I didn't kill anyone. I was just there.
It does feel like that last scene needed. It did seem like that last scene needed a follow up between her and Kira at least.
Yeah,
it seemed like that. Their conversation needed a follow up. I think. But yeah, it's a weird ending. It's just. As I say, the first half I like it set up, all the conversations they're having. I think that's really good. I like, again, like you said, the exploration of Dax, the idea that she feels beholden to the past, her previous life, as it were. I think that's quite fascinating. And I like, and you may have seen it, it's a meme that's around the whole thing of, where Core, it's like, he gives a big hug, Curzon, my dear old friend. Oh, it's Jadzia now. And he just looks at her and he's like, Jadzia, my dear old friend.
Yes.
And that's become a meme all over for the whole, whenever you get the trans argument being made by certain bigots. And they just post that. This is how you respond. It's that simple.
Yes.
You get told, you're like, oh, okay, cool, fine. But I mean, this is 1994. It's like, we've had this conversation with Maddie a few times. I like how, almost unintentionally, really, because they've created this character that, in essence, used to be male. Whenever they do an episode focused on her and the Trill, in particular her story, it's interesting that they are inadvertently doing the trans experience without meaning to. And based on what Maddie's saying, it's surprisingly doing it quite well without even meaning it. It's impressive, I think.
Yes. Possibly because they're not overthinking it.
Yeah, I think, they're not overthinking it. They're just looking at it as a character thing.
Yeah.
Basically like, well, she's now this person. She used to be that person. I mean, the gender really comes into it. I mean, in this case, it does a little bit because of the whole Klingons. Well, you're not that guy we made the pact with. You're now a woman, so it comes into it here. But more often than not, whenever they're doing the whole consequence of her past life, it's usually not really about the gender so much as just her. Is she responsible for what she did when she was somebody else? And indeed, was she somebody else then anyway? But it's a theme that they clearly really find interesting to deal with because they do keep going into it at least once a season almost with that. Because what was the last Dax episode we did? We had one where Maddie came into it. The one where
it was.
What's his face?
Wasn't it with the guy that was training to be a host?
Oh no, we had that one, but I was thinking more earlier on the season where you had that guy who came in who couldn't be an initiate, but he decided he wanted Dax as host and took it anyway.
Oh yes.
Of course, then he became a Dax temporarily, and
Yes.
Benjamin was not impressed by that at all. But yeah, I think I like the trill. I think they're an interesting idea. I like the way mostly they're playing with the idea of it. It works quite well, I think.
Just seeing the fighting going on in the background behind you reminded me. One of the things I did like was the I liked the Klingon kind of two-handed double-edged blade, whatever that's called.
The Batleth
that they were using.
Yeah, created by Michael Westmore for Worf, and it's become obviously now the de facto Klingon weapon. He could. Michael Westmore, I believe he's the one who created it. No, he does the. Is it Westmore? Because he does the prosthetics. I forget.
Okay.
So whoever it was, I've got a feeling it's him who did it as well. But whoever it is, this guy who did it, he's a trained weapons specialist. So he made sure he could create something that could be like literally an extension of your arm when you're carrying it, because of the way it's shaped and stuff. So you can like literally have it in the curve of your arm, so it's literally.
Yeah.
And actually, you'll see this later in DS9 certainly. But on Next Gen, whenever Worf's doing his training with it, and obviously he's been trained to do some proper martial arts moves with it and stuff, and the fluidity of the moves and how easy the blades actually can be maneuvered, it's like, oh yeah, you can see that blade could do some damage. It's like at the end scene where Jadzia had it by his neck like that, and he's like, well, go on, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, literally, because you've got the smaller end of his neck here. Actually, I think it was this side. Yeah, whatever. And obviously the curved bit there. And I'm thinking, what would you do? Because that would require quite some movement. Then I thought, actually, in this short end, if you just went like that, it would literally just thump, and he'd be gone.
Open his throat.
It's not a lot, but that's enough to really get right. The thorax would just be ripped right out, basically. It's like, yeah, that's quite a grim weapon if used correctly. Obviously, there's lightweight versions, but I believe they've actually made a real full weight version of it too. Later in the series, both in DS9 and just Star Trek generally, they create another one called the Metlef, I think, which is more. It's basically a Batleth, but a one-handed one, which has got like a handle at the end of it. And much later, as in last year, where Worf obviously, and that's all back at the end of Picard season 3. There's this wonderful scene with Riker and Worf. Obviously, they're much older now. Riker in particular, because he's human, so he's much older now. And Worf's using his blade, and he basically gives it to Riker to hold. I can't remember exactly why. And Riker takes it, and he's just like, he's like, shit, I didn't know it was that heavy. I'm like, it kind of works. The idea that they're so much heavier than humans are used to, but the Klingons are just naturally, genetically stronger. But yeah, it was a good moment. I mean, Riker swearing is kind of like, well, I don't know if I like our hero Trek character swearing, but fine, But it was a good moment. It's like, which now makes me think I need to pay more attention to see who handles these blades that aren't Klingons going forward. For that, because that joke has to work, you know what I mean? It worked in the moment, but does it really work in context? Because Jadzia's carrying this Batleth quite easily, frankly.
Yeah, she
doesn't seem to be having much problem with the weight of it. I don't know. Or maybe they haven't decided they're heavy yet.
Maybe not.
I don't know. We'll see much more of it. So. I mean, this episode, it's So go on.
I was going to say I liked the 3 Klingons as well, because, and certainly just having seen Journey's End as well, Worf is he's like everyone else on the Enterprise. He's so straight laced, and it's all everything by the book. And he's very honourable as well, and it's nice to see them playing a little bit more with with Klingons
They
with these three guys, because
they
they
do
weren't all
acknowledge
the
it
same.
in Next
They were.
Gen.
Sorry.
Well, in Next Gen, they acknowledge that Worf is not because Worf was raised by humans because his parents died when he was like 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so all he knew of Klingon culture growing up, anyway, was probably stuff that he read about. And so the idea is that he's basically created this idealistic idea of a Klingon in his head of what a Klingon should be. And so that's who he lives as. But of course, when he starts meeting other Klingons in reality, he starts to learn Klingons aren't quite who you think you are. That is a wonderful line where Guinan, Whoopi Goldberg's character, she joins Worf for like a phaser range thing. And she's on about how she's made a bet about making Worf laugh, even though we've seen him laugh, but they obviously forgot that. In fact, laughing in front of Guinan, but we'll forget that too. And he's like, oh, it's not a good day to have that bet, blah, blah, blah. Klingons don't laugh. And she's like, oh, I don't know. I've seen Klingons who obey laughter and make your toes curl. And he's like, well, maybe I'm not like other Klingons. She's like, is that a fact? Which, of course, is the whole point. That he's got this thing in his head of what Klingons are like when he's really not like them. So, you've seen that in this one episode, yeah. Klingons are so not straight. They're not just these warriors. There's so much more, but we don't get to see it very often.
Is this the second time we've seen Klingons since DS9? Because there was those 2 female Klingons early on, wasn't there?
Well, we saw, we saw the Duras sisters.
That's it.
And bizarrely, the episode I was just talking about, Next Gen, is the one where they first appear. So that's a nice coincidence. We have had one Klingon in that earlier Dax episode I was talking about, because remember the ones who came and stole the symbiote from Dax and put it in that other guy. One of them was a Klingon.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Not a very good Klingon, but a Klingon. We've certainly had the Klingon. I feel sure we've had the Klingon dude who sells Klingon food on the promenade and sometimes sings when people are trying to eat. So we've had Klingon, but this is the first. This is probably the first, other than the Duras sisters, the first time Klingons have been central to an episode.
Yes,
but not the last time.
Actually, we've seen Klingons in DS9 an awful lot more than I've given them credit for. So that's
they're just not. Yeah, they're just not like vitally important to the plot necessarily. I mean, the Duras sisters, they were pretty they're kind of the B plot of that story, as I recall. Because that story was more about that. What was the name? The first time they tried to play the story of ex-resistance fighter catches up with Takira and tests loyalties, because they've done that twice now. Yeah, that was the BA story there. The Duras sisters were just like a plot device of, we need him to be in dodgy dealings with somebody, oh, we'll use them. But this is the first time we've actually had Klingons legit up front. And it's kind of fun. I mean, one thing I was watching and thinking about this, I'm like, would this episode hold as much weight if it weren't for the fact that these 3 Klingons were classic era Klingons, obviously with new bumps? Because I mean, it's a good enough episode, but I don't know, would it? I suppose it would, because it's still the Dax episode of it would still work. If it's still over 3 random Klingons that we'd never met before. And in fact, I mean, obviously, although I mentioned it to you before, you're not watching this knowing that, these characters are from this episode and that episode and this episode.
No, I remember you mentioning it when you said it again, but it wasn't when I was watching it. It slipped my mind, so I was just enjoying it for enjoying them for what they were. It's certainly not an episode that I can see working in anything other than DS9. I mean, I suppose potentially Next Gen, if maybe they were if the Enterprise was in for a refit or something somewhere,
I don't
and
know.
they happened to be at
I
the
think
bar or something. There was a member of the crew.
I don't know. I think with this one, just obviously knowing TNG a wee bit more than you do, I think I could easily see this episode with obviously have to be worked obviously to make it work for TNG, but I could see it working where it just basically be Riker and Worf have got this blood oath, because Riker was very much into Worf's Klingon stuff for quite a while at Next Gen. Quite a few times they touch upon it, that he's, Worf and Riker were actually really good friends, but sometimes in the series the writers kind of forgot that. But when they really went back on it, it really worked. And Riker, for instance, is the first human to serve on board a Klingon vessel. And that's way back in season 2 of Next Gen. So, yeah, I could sort of see how this would kind of work. It'd be a slightly different story, but the core idea of Riker being held to a blood oath he made with Worf, or a different Klingon from maybe season 2 or something, yeah, I think it could work. But the idea of, the Dax element is obviously what makes this work, that she's wrestling, because this, ultimately it's all about her wrestle with a promise she made, well, not that she made, a previous host made 80 years ago. So we're talking 60 odd years before she was even born. And her do I have to live up to it? Well, actually, no, I don't, but I feel like I do. So, yeah, that element certainly wouldn't have worked on TNG, but yeah, I could see Riker doing a blood oath thing. That's very Riker, actually. Thinking about it.
So potentially
Riker.
A version of this kind of story could translate to Next Gen, but you couldn't just pick it up wholesale and put it into another show, and it would for it to work. I think that's all. That's still our kind of mark of kind of first base as to whether or not it's a good DS9 episode or not. Just whether it just works within that format.
Yeah, kind of go wholesale with just a minor tweak. It's usually our thing, but obviously what I was suggesting was a little bit more than a minor tweak. But yeah, I think you're right. In that regard, this is very much a DS9 thing, and those helmets look ridiculous. Don't know if you can see it on my screen.
Yeah,
just showing you the guards at this thing, and it's just like, what the frickin' hell are they supposed to be? See, we're now in a bit of the episode where I'm like, meh. Maybe I'm going a bit meh, and I'm allowing my foreknowledge to intrude a wee bit, because
maybe
obviously Worf comes into it. No, so as you can imagine, Klingons do start playing a more of a part of this show just by virtue of Worf being about. And this stuff is all very lightweight in comparison. Good, but
I wonder then if like we said before about the fact that there's no payoff at the end. It just the episode kind of fizzles out.
Stops.
Although I'm thinking, okay, that's from a serial point of view, that's positive. But also, I was expecting there to be something at the end, just a line or a comment from someone when she walked back in. It seemed a little odd that there was nothing. I wonder if just the fact that there wasn't that moment of closure at the end is potentially what makes that the second half of the episode feel less less good to you. Less good, he says. Words failing him horribly.
I think for me, because I did so well at the beginning of this episode. It's your turn. And I'm going to leave it all in just so the viewers will be like, see, it just took Tim a real while to catch up with my word salad earlier. No, I think trying not to give stuff away here. I think there is a payoff long term for the story, certainly Jadzia's story, but not specifically for this plot as such. I think it's more of a thematic payoff for her as a character. That's what I'm saying earlier about how this kind of sowed the seeds for a lot of her character work later. So even though this episode doesn't wrap up very well, and it's certainly going to be referenced again, I can say that without giving anything away. And we definitely haven't seen the end of a particular guest character, which obviously narrows it down because only one survived. Who could that be? But yeah, and that's quite fun when more thrown into the mix. But yeah, there's definitely payoff, but as I say, thematically as opposed to specifically to do with this plot itself.
Yeah.
But so no, it's not that for me. I think it's just, I don't know, I think the second half of this, I've always felt this, I'm pretty sure this episode just feels a bit like, meh, boring. The philosophical side of it all in the beginning was more interesting to me because Star Trek has primarily always been about philosophical struggles and, you know, the big what ifs and how do we approach this and the talk, the human nature, as it were. Star Trek is always more about that and space battles and just battles generally. But, and also at this point in Star Trek's history, certainly, they're not that good at filming and depicting battles, I don't think. I don't think they've quite got the kinetic energy of it yet. It's something they obviously have got better with over the decades. Because again, Star Trek, even classic Trek, really wasn't an action show. I mean, it's odd that people tend to remember it as such because there were action bits, obviously, phaser fires and all this crap. Very rarely space battles because obviously the model work they could do back in the 60s didn't really lean into that.
It wasn't really battles, so it was just the Enterprise firing on stuff.
Yeah, occasionally. And you have occasional phaser fights or a few fisticuffs with Kirk and whoever.
Yes.
But it usually came down to talking people out of stuff or coming to some kind of compromise or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's where Star Trek, that's what Star Trek is meant to be. Or I say meant to be. That's what Star Trek was, certainly. And still is at this point where we are. So when it comes to like this sort of stuff, I'm like, yeah, it's okay, but not that invested. And maybe
I was going to say
although these characters,
but maybe it's not as effective because they're only used to shooting either hand to hand, hand to hand kind of fisticuffs, or people shooting phasers at each other from across the
they've not quite got the hang of the actual weapon battles, with handheld weapons and stuff. But it's definitely something they will get better at because this show is going to lean heavily into all kinds of stuff like that soon. But no, I mean, again, it's a good episode. I don't know. It's okay. I think it's a good thinking about wrapping up here because obviously we're late at night here. I'll ideally end with the episode if we can. See that? Because I thought it sounded like it was actually good because it shows us how long we need to talk for.
Yes. Talked our way through the episode.
Yes. So we've got the whole end quite silent soon. But yeah, for me, I think I like the philosophical stuff. I like the early half of the episode in particular. Second half's a bit meh. But I do like, as I say, I like the Jadzia stuff for sure. The three Klingons to me is like, yeah, it's nice that they were from the original series, but character-wise, they are so obviously different to how they would have been back then. Although there's enough elements, or at least mention of elements, that you're like, yeah, I can sort of see that they're the same characters, even though they look obviously very different. But before it goes on to the next episode and gives stuff away, again. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's an okay episode, I think. It's basically what I think.
Having the same actors return playing those characters, I think it's I was going to say fan service, but it's not really, because it didn't make any difference to me as as just a casual viewer, as it were. I didn't feel that there was any level of kind of celebration or backstory or anything like that there that I was missing. Everything that needed to be there for the episode was there in the episode, and that was good. So anything on top of that is really just for the fans to go, "Oh, wasn't that nice? That's nice." But it doesn't matter for the casual viewer, which is good. And otherwise the casual viewer may get put off. So that's all. I think that's always important to remember with these things.
Actually, I based on what you're saying here, actually, I think this is probably the best way to do fan service, in that there's stuff there that fans will be like, "Oh, wow, that's quite cool." You know, I get what's going on here, but a casual viewer doesn't need to know, because these three characters, in this episode certainly, were treated as free characters. You know, they weren't. You didn't need to know anything about them other than who they were for this story. You know, that's all you needed to know. So I think that I'm sure we've said this before. Actually, that is the best way to do continuity and stuff. Where if you're a fan, you can see more into it. If you're not, you don't need to worry, because the story still makes sense.
Yes, it doesn't impact it in any way, and it's just something a little kind of sugar coated for the fans, just to give it slightly more appeal, maybe. But I mean, overall, it was an episode that I really enjoyed, and I'm kind of conscious that there are a number in the second series that I haven't enjoyed. So I evaluate it for that.
Yes.
It's an episode that got my attention, and I found myself interested in the stories of these Klingons, and particularly their relationship with Curzon. And so it picked me up and it took me along with it, which is good. Kept my attention. Yes, I guess the towards the end, I think the whole situation with the albino, potentially, looking back on it now, think perhaps they could have done a bit more with it, or it could have had a little bit more of an impact than it did. And as I said before, although I like the kind of the serial feel of it, of thinking that it doesn't have to have closure, part of me also missed there not being just a little moment at the end.
I have a question to intrude on your final thoughts then, based on what you're saying. Do you think, narratively, I mean, because you can argue the albino stuff was kind of the B plot and it wasn't that important, because it's all about what Dax is going through, really. But if they had some earlier scenes with the albino being aware that trouble's coming his way, to heighten the attention a wee bit, would that maybe then possibly of the second half you felt more of a payoff for it? Because at least you've got a sense of who he is a little bit. Because all we just told about him all the time. We never get a sense of who he is, even when we're actually there.
That is a good point, because I suppose you've got the having it as it is. You've got that always that potential prospect that perhaps the situation isn't going to play out as it should, and that maybe they'll get there, and the albino isn't something that you expect, or or will actually be dead already, or something. So I suppose it maintains an air of mystery, just having it as it is. But yeah, I think potentially then the payoff isn't as strong as it could be, and it may be that the episode just builds up expectations too much about about what should happen in the last third or so.
I think that's fair.
Of it. It's the other thing it did was it reminded me a little bit of well, no, I was going to say Lord of the Rings. It's not because there's no I can't think of a direct like Tolkien story that mirrors this, but there was something. I think there was something about those three old Klingons that was that Tolkien's work is littered with stories of bitter old dwarves who were, looking to, well, I suppose like Thorin in The Hobbit, looking to retrieve his gold and the kingdom from the dragon and stuff like that. So there was, and because there is I suppose you could say there is a passing similarity, superficial similarity between the Klingons and dwarves and stuff. You've got that. There was something something slightly Middle Earth I saw in the whole thing as well.
Well, yeah, I suppose the Klingons have that aspect of a lot of their history is an oral history, but their history, I mean, it does seem that they must have books, but it seems to be very much about the stories, or rather the songs they sing. Because Klingon history is told in song a lot, like in opera and whatever. So, yeah, there's, kind of a parallel there, isn't there, a little bit? It's all about the stories they tell, and the stories of these ancient warriors and these ancient quests and these ancient everything.
Yes. Yeah, quests and stuff.
I like that element of Klingon culture, actually, yeah. But yeah, cool. Yeah. All right, then. I think that is us done on this particular episode.
I reckon so.
Tim. Okay.
Andy.
The next DS9 we'll be doing in probably 2 weeks is called The Marquee.
The Marquee.
Any thoughts?
I do recall...
it's not about a banner.
No. A large tent. I do recall that part of the Voyager crew were Marquee. Chakotay.
Correct. Correct. In fact, interesting point, Dorvan 4, which was the place where the American Indians, Native Americans, whatever they want to call themselves nowadays, because apparently most of them, like American Indians, they find that fine enough. That is supposed to be the colony from where he originated.
Right. Again, okay. I was wondering about that when I was watching it at the time, thinking, I wonder if Chakotay is in there, because he looked, the actor looked
he's supposed to be Native American.
Native American.
But the character is
right. Okay.
But certainly that was the intent. However, I don't think they ever confirm it in Voyager itself, which is like, then why bother? There's another oblique reference to him in another TNG episode we were watching after the Marquee 2-parter, which is another part of the ongoing thing, where there's a reference to a character who's supposed to be Chakotay, but again, it's later, it's never ever referred to again when Chakotay is actually part of Star Trek. It's like, you couldn't have found a moment somewhere to mention, oh, I knew blah, blah, blah. And you're like, that's who she was talking about. Okay, it's confirmed now. It's like, why do this?
Because I did look at the actors playing the Native Americans, just to see if one of them was the guy that's Chakotay in Voyager, just to see if they'd planted the seed really early. So
that'd be quite clever if it had been. If he was just there in the background.
Yes. So so it's a 2-parter, isn't it? The next one.
It is. Yeah.
You just bitch slap the screen.
I'm all blurred here. I feel like I'm underwater. Oh, there I am. Oh no. Yeah, I'm back.
It must have had a few. It's struggling to
regenerating.
focus on you. So we've got the two-parter marquee, but before that, we've got another Who commentary, haven't we?
Yes,
it'll be more of a review, won't it, on Messer Marco Polo?
Yes, I made a little post about it on YouTube in the community tab and on the Patreon. But in case anybody hasn't actually read any of it, Tim and I discussed this past week that there are early Who episodes, obviously, that don't exist, and some of them are actually more or less complete stories. And it would be a shame we decided to skip them when it's stories such as Marco Polo, which obviously is quite an important story in the canons of Who anyway.
Yeah.
So what we decided we're going to do, because Tim doesn't think there's going to be much mileage of us reacting to, like, say, a loose canon recreation of telesnaps, which I can understand. We'd probably get quite bored. Like, we'd probably end up talking about anything but the episode because we're just not being engaged with it because it's mostly oral. But so we basically decided what we're going to do in then is we are going to watch these episodes in our own time in between filming. And then we're going to do like on DS9, we're then going to just basically review the story instead of react to it, and then continue reacting when we've got stuff to react. I say react. We have an episode to do a commentary on, I should say, rather, because we don't do much reacting really, we just talk over them, which is our thing. So we're going to review it. So next week, assuming Tim gets us to do all 6 episodes between now and then.
I've not only done all 6, I've done all 7.
Is it 7?
It is. It's a 7-parter, Marco Polo. If you've missed the last episode, you've got a surprise coming.
I haven't done them. I've done the first 2, but then I thought, right, I'm going to do them again. I think I said this to you. So I'm going to actually make notes now that I know that we're actually reviewing it properly. Because originally I was just going to go through it just so we knew about it and mention it or whatever. Since we're actually reviewing it, I'm going to watch it and I'll make some notes. Because there's some good stuff in episode 2 in particular. I was like, ooh, I better make a note of this. I need to watch it again because I've completely forgotten about it. Because 7 episodes later, week later, I'll be like, oh, there was something in episode 2. What was it? It's about Susan. I remember that. So, but yes. So next week, we shall be doing Marco Polo.
Mm-hmm.
I might get some polos just for the fun of it. For our American, are they American sweets as well? They're certainly UK sweets.
I don't know.
Seems Marco Polo.
Indeed.
We can have lots of fun with that next week. Anyway, Tim.
They'll be rolling in the aisles. Let's wrap up this hell before it drags on any longer. So, Anyway, thank you, viewer, for joining us once again. This will be available to view for free on Patreon and on YouTube, and to listen to on Spotify, listener, if you're still there. Please do. Please do let us know and comment and like and subscribe and do all the other things, and just let us know that you're out there and enjoying us. And if there's things you'd like us to do different, then let us know. If the thing you'd like us to stop doing, then let us know. If you want us to go away and never come back, might as well let us know as well. We'll consider it. Still go on anyway. Yes.
We will.
You can find us, if you want to, in all the usual social media places, and there will be links and so forth along with the video. So thank you once again to everyone. Thank you, Andy, for giving up your Monday evening.
It's all right.
And
we'll do anything anyway. All right.
It has been, as always, an absolute pleasure. And so, if there's nothing else to say, I will finish off with the traditional bye-bye, Duggan.
Bye-bye.